Hello and welcome again to this edition of Meet the Candidates. I'm David Nicholas. We are speaking with our guests virtually, and this time joined by U.S. Senator Gary Peters, Democrat of Michigan, who is seeking a second term in office. Good to see you, Senator. Congratulations on the win in the August primary. And in the first minute or two, tell us a little bit about you, your background, and the experience you're bringing to the campaign.
Well, I currently serve as the United States Senator representing the state of Michigan. I'm in my first term here as a senator. And during that time, I brought my experience in business, spending over 20 years in the business world, as well as my service in the military. I was in the U.S. Navy Reserves, rose to the rank as a lieutenant commander, and then served in the state legislature and the U.S. House before being elected to the Senate. And I bring all of that experience together to get things done for Michigan. I'm very pleased to say that I've been ranked as one of the most effective United States senators in getting things done. The Nonpartisan Center for Effective Lawmaking out of the University of Virginia and Vanderbilt University ranks every member of Congress on what we get done and the significance of it. And I was ranked the fourth most effective Democratic U.S. Senator in the last term. And I'm just in my first term as a freshman. In fact, over the last 2 years, I have written and passed more bills through the United States Senate than any other senator, either Democratic or Republican. And that's why I want to continue to do that, to be focused on practical, common sense problem solving. I'm pleased to have passed legislation to help veterans transition from active duty into skills training. I've worked to secure our borders. I've worked to help veterans also suffering from PTSD, and a number of pieces of legislation to help small businesses and families move forward.
In addition to what the accomplishments that you note from the first term, what are, from your perspective as a candidate, and also what the voters are telling you, are you identifying as the key issues for this campaign and the time moving forward?
Well, there's no question right now, as I travel all across the state of Michigan, everybody's focused on getting through this COVID crisis. There's nothing more important than dealing with the most significant crisis that any of us hopefully will ever face in our lifetime, a simultaneous healthcare crisis and economic crisis. I serve as the ranking member, means the top Democrat on the Senate Homeland Security Committee. I oversee FEMA, which is the federal emergency folks overseeing it. And I've been aggressively pushing them to do a better job than what we've seen from this administration. It needs to be coordinated to a greater extent. We need to make sure personal protection equipment's available, testing supplies are available, and also deal with the economic aspects of it as well. So I've leaned in aggressively in that regard. In fact, I authored the Pandemic Assistance Act, which was incorporated into the CARES Act, which expanded unemployment eligibility to folks who are suffering as a result of being laid off for no fault of their own. We have to make sure that families have the resources necessary to keep food on the table and a roof over their head. And I've also been particularly focused on helping small businesses survive this pandemic. If they do not survive, it'll be a whole lot more difficult to get this economy back up on our feet. We need to put resources in. That's why I've been a strong proponent and fought aggressively for the PPP program, which helps our small businesses. So that has to continue. We need to get through this pandemic. It's going to unfortunately last longer than any of us would like, but that's something I'm focused on. And with that comes the need for healthcare. It's clear as a result of this pandemic that we need to make sure that everybody in this country, no matter who they are, no matter where they live, have access to quality, affordable healthcare. And I'm going to aggressively work to make that a reality in the next term. We certainly have some challenges. We have the Trump administration right now in a lawsuit that would basically unwind the Affordable Care Act, which would mean protections for people who have pre-existing conditions would go away. It also means senior citizens would see increases in their drug prices. It also means that some of the essential benefits that are provided, like free screenings and visits to a physician, would be eliminated. So we need to continue to work to make sure that everybody has access to quality, affordable health care.
Are any of those priorities shaped in a different way regarding the proposals you would be bringing to this campaign because of the overlying circumstances of COVID-19, the overall approach not only to a public health crisis, but healthcare in general?
Yeah, it certainly has created a greater sense of urgency. We look at how this pandemic has impacted folks, and it's clear that certain communities in particular were impacted to a disproportionate effect on them, which means we've got to make sure everybody has access to quality healthcare. I think it creates the sense of urgency necessary and a realization of just how dramatic some of the gaps exist in our society. But we also have to make sure it's affordable for everybody, especially the cost of prescription drugs, which continue to rise at a price that is simply unacceptable. That's why I've aggressively worked on legislation to lower the price of prescription drugs. We have to make sure that healthcare is accessible and cost effective for everyone in the system. And clearly in this pandemic, we see that the cost of prescription drugs is a problem that we must deal with.
Same sense of again, the COVID-19 influence when it comes to the economic recovery. The economy in one state prior COVID-19, and now we have seen obviously a great impact. How do your proposals regarding overall economic, in this case recovery, and also then continued economic growth, how have those been shaped, and what would some of those specifics be should you be elected to a second term?
Well, certainly when it comes to the economy, we have to continue to have a focus on small business. They're the engine of growth. Those are the folks that create the jobs and in our local communities, more importantly. That's why in getting through this crisis, I worked aggressively for the Paycheck Protection Program to help our small businesses stay open. When it became apparent that many of our businesses in underserved areas in rural parts of the state of Michigan, for example, were not getting the resources that they needed to survive, I aggressively worked to change that. And it was in large measure as a result of some of the accountability measures that I put into the CARES Act that allowed us to see that the PPP program wasn't working for some of our smallest businesses, the ones that were most vulnerable to this pandemic, and needed to make those changes, which we were able to do. Right now, I'm working on a Restart Act in order to pass legislation to help businesses some who have not been able to stay open, to help them restart. There's always cost associated with bringing a business back online and opening it back up again. And we're going to need to provide help for those entrepreneurs to be able to get up and running again. I'm very concerned about folks who are currently unemployed, that getting them back to work is going to be critically important. And part of that work is work that I'm doing in skills training. In fact, I've passed legislation, was signed into law to help veterans as they're coming off of active duty to get the kinds of skills necessary to get a job through apprenticeship programs, for example. I think we need to expand those programs beyond just veterans to everybody so that folks have the kinds of skill training that we know lead to good paying jobs, good middle class jobs. And that's something I will continue to focus on in the next term.
Does this economy get reshaped to the degree that we saw post the major downturn now nearly 12 years ago regarding the auto industry and the bailout that was required and the great transformation for Michigan's economy? Are we facing something to that level now due to the impact that COVID-19 has had on the state?
Well, certainly the economy is in constant change, and we're seeing new technology come on board that's shaping the economy in dramatic ways. And that's why I focused on skills training, that we have to make sure folks have the skills necessary to get into these new jobs. We're basically building on the existing skills they have now, but we're going to see some changes in the way we produce products and in the way the economy moves forward. And I'm particularly focused on manufacturing. That's who we are as Michiganders. 20% of our gross domestic product is manufacturing. That's most of second of any other state except Indiana, although we produce a whole lot more than Indiana. And I want to make sure those factories continue to be strong and manufacturing is strong. We have the opportunity to take back jobs from China and other places, bring them back to Michigan, particularly with advances in technology and artificial intelligence. That's why I've proposed a National Institute of Manufacturing so that we can focus on manufacturing, understand those are great jobs in Michigan, and the spillover to the rest of the economy is very strong from manufacturing. But we have to have a coordinated strategy, and we have to be focused on making sure folks are prepared to walk into those jobs and make a good living. So I think that's what we need to focus on, is understanding that things are changing, they're going to continue to change, and we have to always make sure that people have an opportunity to get the skills they need to get those great jobs.
Speaking with U.S. Senator Gary Peters, Democrat of Michigan, seeking a second term of office here on Meet the Candidates. About 3 minutes left with you, Senator, and I wonder if you then can identify another key issue. You've talked obviously about the public health crisis and its overall impact on the economy. Is there another key issue that you and or the voters you're speaking with have identified for this campaign?
Well, certainly getting through the COVID crisis is number one, making sure that we have the jobs available and folks prepared for those jobs. The economy are the top issues. But something that I'm very passionate about is making sure that we protect the Great Lakes. Next to our people, there is no greater resource for our state than the Great Lakes. That's why we need to keep them vibrant and clean, not just for us, but for future generations. I'm happy to say I was able to secure additional funding for the Great Lakes Restoration Fund, which is a very important federal program to make sure the lakes stay clean, cleaning up old toxic sites, as well as making sure the tributaries going into the lakes are as clean as possible. I've also been working to protect the state from other harmful impacts from pollution, and specifically PFAS. PFAS is a forever chemical that has contaminated many sites across Michigan. Of the 700 PFAS contaminated sites across the country, 200 of them are in our state. We need to be aggressive in cleaning up those sites, but we also have to make sure that PFAS doesn't get into the environment in the first place. And I've passed legislation to do just that. A lot of PFAS gets into the environment as a result of firefighting foams used, particularly in aviation. Legislation that I've passed will basically phase that out, and in the process will protect those areas around those airports and the people who live around those airports, and also will protect the Great Lakes from having PFAS seep into the Great Lakes basin. The Great Lakes are critically important to me. It's a big part of what I do here every day, and something I'll continue to do in the next 6 years.
In addition to invasive species, PFAS, the toxic sites, what would be a first specific priority that you would have for the lakes? We've got about a minute left, and I also want to give you a chance for a final message to the voters, but what would be a specific Great Lakes proposal you'd look to first?
Well, I'm continuing to make sure that we have pipeline safety, for example, as another area. We have a number of oil pipelines that crisscross the state. One in particular I'm concerned about is Line 5 in the Straits of Mackinac. I've been aggressively working to make sure that that pipeline is subjected to the strictest federal oversight when it comes to protecting the Great Lakes. If there were an oil spill in the Straits of Mackinac, it'd be absolutely catastrophic, particularly when you think about it in the Great Lakes, a body of water that provides drinking water to 40 million people. So I've been focused and will continue to focus on making sure that we do everything we can to prevent that spill from happening and protect the Great Lakes for the long term.
And in that last half minute then, Senator, what would be that final message you would want to leave with the voters as they get set to go to the polls?
Well, I would certainly ask for your support for another 6 years. Over these last 6 years, I've been able to be ranked as one of the most bipartisan members of the U.S. Senate, and as a result of that, one of the most effective United States senators in getting things done. In the last 2 years, passing more bills to the U.S. Senate than any Democratic senator or Republican senator, and I've done that in my first term. I'm laser focused on the needs here in the state of Michigan. I've had the privilege of traveling all across the state, meeting people all across the state over these last few years. And what I hear in those meetings, I take back to Washington and pass meaningful legislation to make a difference. And I welcome the opportunity to continue that work over the next 6 years.
Well, we appreciate your time today, Senator, and good luck with the rest of the campaign. Stay safe. Thank you very much for joining us.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
And here on Meet the Candidates, we've been speaking with U.S. Senator Gary Peters, Democrat of Michigan, seeking a second term in office. A reminder that under Michigan election laws, all qualifying candidates for office have been invited to participate in this series. I'm David Nicholas. On behalf of all of us here, thanks for joining us, and we do encourage you to get out and exercise your right to vote on Tuesday, November 3rd.